To be honest with you, Dylan, the to explain it to people, to explain it to people how it was, how amazing, how magnetic, how powerful,
Oh,
charismatic he was. I'll explain it to you in 2 words. And we're superstars.
I always prefer to go back and watch the 80s wrestling and early 90s.
It's homemade, so even me I think the worst part of the show is me being a commentator. Arriba.
Oh, man, when he wrestled Macho Man like in the 80s, those are damn classic.
The sky is the limit. And and that was his line, boy, that he'd give everybody.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Dylan Gemelli podcast, and today I am bringing you an extremely special guest. This is Jacques Rougeau, also known as the Mountie.
That's me. How you doing?
I'm great, man. It's absolutely amazing to have you on here. Guys, I'm sure that are watching, everybody has seen Jacques before, whether he was wrestling as one of the Rougeau brothers, which was an amazing tag team, or when he came back as the Mountie, who always gets his man. That is Jacques. Man, I got to tell you, I was terrified of you when I was a kid. When you came out as the Mountie, you scared the crap out of me. It was awesome, and I can remember everything.
It's funny, Dylan, that you say that, because when I was young, my as you know, we're 4 generations of wrestlers. So my father and my uncle, I used to go see them wrestle. I was like maybe 4 years and older, and then all the way up to 10, 12 years old, I'd go in the dressing room, and there'd be a good friend of mine, Abdullah the Butcher, that would have his manager, which was Eddie the Brain Creechman, and he'd have this shock stick, where that's where I got the idea from anyway, and he'd do it on purpose sometimes, he'd corner me in the dressing room with the shock stick, and he'd scare the living death out of me, and so once you live the experience, on the other side. Then I knew right then that the people are going to react the same way I did, because when you see that nice flame that comes out at the end of the shock stick, electricity always scares people. And
oh yeah,
and so it worked well. Yeah, it worked well. I love that gimmick, the Mountie.
It was awesome. And you brought up Abdullah the Butcher. All I can picture of him was when I was a kid, seeing all that blood running down his face. Those are like infamous pictures in magazines I used to have.
Amazing. Yeah, you'd think, and I remember seeing the matches with my dad, at the Montreal Forum at the Paul Sauvé Arena, where I knew when I'd see the card earlier that week, if my dad was wrestling Abdullah, I knew there'd be blood, and I knew there'd be forks, and I knew there'd be, but anyway, my dad was my hero. So, it was a good time in my life, because all the way up to the age of 13 years old, I wasn't smart to the business. So
right.
I didn't know it was staged and it was a work. So when I go see my dad, he was really my hero. And it just so happened it was good, because the owners of the company was my dad and my uncle. So they always managed, at the long story, at the end of the story, they always came out victorious. So my father was my hero.
I love it. So I'm definitely going to want to get into some of the, your phases in your career and go over that. But I wanted to start with, because I know you've got a lot going on right now, and your wrestling academy is booming. It's popular. There's got a lot of buzz around it. So I kind of wanted you to kind of just tell me why you started it, what all goes into it, what you've been doing with it, and what you got going on, because I think there's a lot of people that'll be interested in that.
Well, thank you, Dylan. Yeah, it's really a major project. It's become a worldwide watched project, and from all the podcasts I do in Australia and Europe, and everybody starts following this, and it's happening in Canada. And it's what it is actually it's giving a springboard to all the Canadian talent, female and male, to get some exposure around the world and in the States and all the big companies. And so what I started to do was, first of all, during the pandemic. Like everybody else on the planet, I started a podcast, because that was the only thing. That was the only thing to do to stay alive. So I started a podcast, and I was lucky, because I had a lot of notoriety in Quebec, from different eras also, I had a lot of singing friends. I had a lot of comedian friends. I had a lot of hockey player friends. I had in different disciplines, and GSP and the Ultimate Fighting. And, I had a bunch of friends that came into my podcast. And I had this girl that showed up one time, and she was called Marie-Hélène Sibert, and she was a great singer. And what they had done a show in Quebec called the Star Academy, which was like maybe 20 years ago. And what they do is they'd recruit all the independent singers across Quebec that were amateurs but very good, and they put them in a contest where weekly on TV they would have them sing, and then they'd have judges, and people would vote, and they'd eliminate them as we went on. So they'd perform that night, and then whoever performed the best that night, they kept on going to the next stage, and the winner would finish up singing at the Montreal Forum or the Bell Center or with Céline Dion. So it was a hell of a contest, for these amateurs to be on the same platform as Céline Dion on the same stage. So then one day she was in my podcast, Marie-Hélène, and she was telling me her experience and how it worked. And after the podcast, the guests, they always leave. And I looked at my girlfriend. I said, wouldn't that be something if we did something like that with wrestling? Like, if I recruited wrestlers from all over Canada that trying to make it in the big leagues. There's so many independent wrestling companies in Canada, from Nova Scotia all the way to Vancouver. And I said, but there's so much great talent that have not been discovered. Like, my father, remember when I was young, my father always told me there's two ways you could make it in this business, is being at the right place at the right time and knowing the right people. So we put a platform on where we found some sponsors, and we made a contest 2 years ago where there was 4 winners of $5,000, where they're used to making $100 a night, in the little league. So now it's like $5,000 to get a chance to make. And plus I'd managed to tag up with a guy called QT Marshall in Atlanta at the Nightmare Factory, with Cody Rhodes as the owner and Billy Gunn's part of that. And so they train a lot of people. And so were my winners. They would win $5,000, and they spend 3 months at the Nightmare Factory to be trained by them.
That's awesome.
It's awesome because it's being at the right place at the right time and knowing the right people. You had people from AEW and you had people from WWE that were at the same school. So what a great opportunity for Canadian wrestlers. So we did that 2 years ago. We had 4 winners of $5,000, and then they'd come to Montreal. I'd fly them in. We'd find sponsors to buy their tickets, come to Montreal, and they'd wrestle. And I'd go on Zoom. And on Zoom, I would put the match together with somebody from Nova Scotia against someone from Calgary, example. And then I'd get on Zoom, and then I'd help them put their match together. And they have pretty much their own ideas. I'd just guide them a little bit to make sure that it was even, the match. And when they come night of the show, they'd perform. They'd have to do a short 30-second interview before getting in the ring, because they were judged on their interview, on their gear, on their charisma, on their talent in the ring. So and we had judges by the ring, but we also had QT Marshall that was in Atlanta. So he was on the giant screen in Montreal. And when the match would finish, the 2 opponents would stand up in the ring, and they'd look at the giant screen. And then QT Marshall would say, well, I liked your ability. I liked your technique. I liked your interview. I liked your charisma. But tonight I'm going with you. And then one was eliminated live, so it was a reality show. It wasn't, so as much as the show was staged that I put all the matches together, the decision wasn't. So it was like, you're only as good as your last performance. In other words, in wrestling, Dylan, there's things you got to remember that people don't know that. But you could have good nights, you could have bad nights, and you could have a hell of a night, or the worst night of your life. And it all happens when you get into the ring. And so with all the pressure they had, it was funny to see a couple of talent broke down. They choked. Sure. And a couple of talent just came out of their shell, and they just performed like crazy. So those went on and passed on to the semifinals and the finals, and we eliminated like that. And so now I'm on my 3rd year this year. And this year was the 2nd year, actually, where we had 3 winners of $10,000. And so last year we had 4 of 5,000. This year was 3 of 10. And next year, which we're already recruiting like crazy now because the word is out in Canada, like, hey, go put your inscription in there because Jacques Rougeau is really paying everybody and things are really happening. So now this year we're going to have 4 winners of $10,000, 2 men and 2 women. And anybody who wants to go see this, they could go on wrestling-academy.ca or lutteacademy.ca, where I hope you could put the addresses down once you finish this podcast there. I hope you could write it down so people could go see the experience of the last show this year, of the show we had, which was tremendous because at the end of this show, what was amazing is QT and Marshall eliminated some talent on the way. But not only that, on the last show in Montreal on the 17th of September, QT Marshall, he brought Harley Cameron to wrestle with one of the girls that was eliminated earlier just as a compensation match. And he himself, QT, came to defend his AAA Latin American title in Montreal against Bobby Sharp, who was eliminated the week before. So you'll see all that on my website. You can go see the competition. You can go see the winners, how it happened. And then you're also going to be able to follow in the next I would say the next month, because now I got all these names that are coming in, but holy mackerel, it's going to be so hard to choose because this year we only have 16 men and 16 women. And I got all these names, all these videos. If you go on my Facebook, because it's a public Facebook, you'll see a picture of me and my girlfriend, and you'll see all the videos of the contestants that are coming in. I'm getting 2, 3, 4 a day in the last month. So it's amazing. Everybody's so excited. I have people, it's so funny. I have people writing me, say, some talent that are writing me, say, Jacques, when are we going to know if we're in or out, so everybody's really so excited of all this. So it's an amazing project. I'm living a dream. I'm living my passion. And what everybody needs to know is, it's true, the expression where they say, behind every big man, there's a bigger lady. And, my girl, Natalie, she's just my rock, man. You have no idea it's me and her that's doing this together. And I come out here and I look good and I shine. I talk about my competition, but she's doing all the work behind me. She's doing everything. But what an amazing contest it is.
That's amazing. And, too, I mean, even if you don't win that contest, you're still getting the exposure, right? And you're getting the opportunity to be in front of people, because a lot of times, like, when you see like America's Got Talent or whatever, the person that wins doesn't necessarily always get everything out of it. Sometimes it's the impression that you make and just that opportunity to be in front of you, to be in front of others, for Cody to see, or QT or people like that's a big deal. Exactly. I mean, that's a huge deal.
Exactly. And now even Scott D'Amore is following it this year with TNA. So everybody's following the contest. And, you go see some talent like Jeremy Prophet, the Cody Brown, the Giant Orion, Chad Dennis. I got names here, KB6, Montello. I got AJ Sanchez. I got Sebastian Wolf out from out west, Bobby Sharp, Gabriel, there's Vinny Da Vinci. And then on the girls' side, wait till you see Zandra Lee and Relentless Riley Rose, Zoe Sager, she's a tiger, and I got Nova coming in, I got Vanna Black, I got Jessica Black, I got Divya Fiji, got Maya Malek, who looks like a Mexican girl. She comes in with her mask, but she's from Nova Scotia. But there are all these talent that are really good, and they're coming out. And like you say, the fun part about this competition is the notoriety that I have, and I'm being very humble about it. But for 10 years, I went around the world as the Mountie, the fabulous Rougeau brothers, and the Quebecers, 3-time tag team champions. Yes. So I made a lot of friends that are doing podcasts in Australia and Europe, everywhere. So now they're all following me. So I get a chance once in a while to get a few of my wrestlers to show the videos of them. And so what a great visibility, a platform for them. So this is the most exciting time I've had in many, many years in my life, because I feel like right now, and I'm not getting rich with this. I got to tell you the truth. The first year we did 2 years ago, we invested out of my pocket $15,000. This year we invested $5,000. Hopefully next year we're gonna make $5,000.
Right.
But I'm living my passion, and and I'm giving back to the talent, and they're having so much fun. You know what? It's so funny because the talent in the last few years have made more money than I did in 3 years doing this project, but they never had as much fun as I did, though.
Right. And that's what it's all about, man.
And this year, Dylan, I got to tell you, Dylan, this year, My brother Raymond, he was judge also with me, by
Wow.
ringside. And, just reliving that after 25, 30 years, working with my brother Raymond by the ring and doing the commentaries before QT Marshall came on the giant screen and took the decision. Me, Raymond, and Jeremy Prophet, and another guy, Michel Monette, who's a captain. He plays like a Jesse the Body Ventura there. And he comes in. We do our opinion on what we thought of the match before QT took the final decision. But what great fun to be able to take that time and not only to choose to give our opinion, but to give credit and to tell the talent what they're doing good, not just what they're doing bad, but what they're doing good. And so it's an awesome project. Wrestling Academy, Jacques Rougeau's Wrestling Academy. Go check that out, guys. You'll have a blast. And the only thing I must say, the only backlash about all this is that it's a home production. So don't expect to see a WWE production. It's homemade. So even me I think the worst part of the show is me being a commentator. But there's more like, holy shit, wow. I'm not a really good commentator. I have a lot of expression, but I'm not a really good commentator. But I'm having a blast, and that's the whole purpose of this whole thing.
Well, and it's cool because you get to see a real life reaction, and not that the WWE commentators aren't good, but a lot of that's they're in their ear telling them what to say, what to do. I mean, you're not doing that, so you're getting real life, and not everything has to have an unlimited budget. I like to see stuff that's just like as real as can be, and a lot of people like that and prefer it. And so if you're given that, that's pretty damn sweet.
One of the moments, my favorite moments, people will never guess what it is. They could never guess what it is. But one of my favorite moments this year is like something happened in the ring. Now, QT's live in Montreal in the last show. So he's going to choose the winners, but he's sitting beside me during the show. So at one point, I go like this. I go, holy shit. And then QT goes like this, like, look at his face, goes like, and he looks at me like, well, we wouldn't be able to say something like that, I guess, on the air. But, but that was my favorite moment to see his face, like, just go like, what did you just say, Jacques? But it was
nothing a real life reaction like that, though, man. That is the best. I love seeing that more so than anything else. That real, true reaction of shock or surprise. It says it all.
Go see the last show on the 17th of September, and then you'll have a blast. I swear. Don't look at the production; just look at the content. And then it's amazing that how the feelings of everybody, the nervousness of everybody, and while you're looking at it, I'll just give you a little in. That tall referee in there that's refereeing the last match and a couple of matches, Bobby Sharp's match and QT Marshall is my son. Emir.
Wow.
So he's so good as a referee. Oh my God. Wait till you see how good he is. He's giving the show out there and having fun too. So it's amazing.
How rewarding to be able to work with your brother all these years and have your son. That's absolutely like, what more could you want? That's so awesome.
It's amazing. Thanks for letting me talk about my project. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll leave some links in the description of this video so that people can check it out. And you know what else you showed me that I specifically love because I'm such an old school fan was the videos like you were talking about of other wrestlers coming in and talking about the academy. Like when I saw Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and you showed me, and there was a slew of guys on there to watch. It was so cool to see all those guys and have them.
Check it out? Did you go check it out?
Right when we got off the phone, I checked it out.
It's amazing, to have The Undertaker, Bret Hart, Ric Flair, GSP, a bunch of guys, all the Bush. I can't remember all the guys that I Double J Jeff Jarrett. Anyway, you'll see they're all there. The old Coco Beware, and they're all there. They're all there saying like, I want to wish good luck to Jacques Rougeau's Wrestling Academy and giving credibility to this tournament, and amazing how it's very. Go check that out on Wrestling Academy and put the link there, and people that are nostalgic, they're going to go see them, the rest, Jake the Snake, they're going to go see them all. And they're all, Jesse the Body Ventura, they're all there. And, sorry, I'm so excited here. I need to drink some water.
That's okay.
Anyway, so check out that. The old fans of the 80s and the 90s, go check out that and you'll relive some great moments when you were a kid.
Oh man. So I want to kind of shift now to that. So, and I was telling you, I was born in 1982. So my childhood was like the 80s wrestling. And, you know, it's evolved, it's so different. And everything's like high flying now and different. I swear to you, even though the matches aren't as intense, I always prefer to go back and watch the 80s wrestling and early 90s for me. And I love the Attitude Era, especially. But I like to go back and watch that. So my first show I went to was in 1985. I was 3 years old. It was in Des Moines, Iowa house show. And so I grew up on like you and your brother, and the tag teams back then were unreal. Heart Foundation, Rougeau Brothers, Dream Team,
British Bulldogs. You had Demolition. You had the Killer
Killer
Bees.
Bees.
You had
Yep.
Tito Santana and Rick Martel. You had Strike Force. You had there was full of tag teams at the times.
Oh.
Even the Yay and the Whoa.
The Bushwhackers. Yes, the Can-Am Connection. That was a good tag.
Yes,
Jim Powers and Paul Roma. Yeah. So
the Hart Foundation. How can you forget the Hart Foundation? You know.
So I recently watched you guys wrestle the Dream Team at WrestleMania 3 because Dream Team was like my favorite tag team back then. I was a huge fan of both of them.
Greg Valentine and Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Yes. So here I wanted to ask you a few things. What drew you to wrestling? Was that something you and your brother both decided upon together? And what made you get started and like what drove you to that industry and that business?
Well, like I said, you know, you're talking about the Rougeau family, which are icons in Quebec. Like, you know, it's we're 4 generations of wrestlers. So I was in my mother's tummy, and we were talking wrestling at the table. You know, so my great uncle, my uncle, my dad, my brothers, and my son. So I remember being 3-4 years old, and starting at that age, and then remembering more at 7 and 8 years old when my father would, like I said, they owned the business in Montreal. So on Monday night was the big matches, the Monday night. So, but on Sunday nights, we lived about 20 miles northeast of Montreal in a little house on the water, and Abdullah the Butcher and Joe LeDuc and those guys would come over to my house the Sunday nights to talk over the matches that they're going to have, you know, and with my father the next night. So I was a young kid when I'd see all these big wrestlers. Ivan Koloff had come. I can't remember all the names that used to come to my house, and I was young. I remember when they'd come sometimes around the pool to talk business. I'd put a sheet on my head, you know, and I'd walk around like Bab Sheik, and I'd be imitating the Sheik or Abdullah, you know, around the pool. So I was brought up in that, you know, and I became an entertainer very young because I saw my dad on TV. I was brought up in that. So for me, it wasn't. I don't think it was really a choice to follow the footsteps, because my father did nothing but that. And my father, like I said, he was my hero. So, and my brother Raymond, he was wrestling. He was 6 years older than me. So when I was like 12, Raymond started, he was 16 years old. So I was 10 years old when my brother Raymond started. So I started watching him against the Don Serrano, the Castillo brothers, you know, and many of the older, you weren't even born in those days, but you probably don't even know these guys. But they used to come to Montreal, and then they had great feuds. So for me, it was like, it wasn't a choice. I was going to become a wrestler. And for my brother Raymond, I think it was the same thing. He was brought up in this. So we started wrestling in Montreal and becoming superstars at home. And then finally, for me, it was like there was no question of doing anything else. I remember, as a matter of fact, when the guys would come and talk over like what they're going to do on the Monday night, they'd come over to Sunday night at my house, and there was always a photographer that come from the Montreal newspaper that come and take a picture, like a face-to-face, like they do in boxing, you know, like or MMA, to promote the show the next day in the newspaper. And I remember so many times I'd get in the school bus on the Monday morning, and then I'd tell the kids on the bus, I'd say, hey, did you see the newspaper this morning? And then they'd say, yeah, we saw your dad in the picture. I said, no. Did you see between my dad's legs? You know, because I had snuck my face into the picture to make sure that I was in the newspaper the next day. But so for me, it wasn't a choice to become a wrestler. That's for sure.
That's amazing. That's a great story, man. So when did you guys? Were you like? I know back then it was territories, probably when you
Yeah.
started before WWF actually kind of took over, and so where did you guys start? I'm assuming your brother started before you, or
Yeah.
how did that
Yeah.
let everything?
Yeah, Raymond was working the Montreal territory. Went a little bit, a couple of times to Detroit for the Sheik. He owned the territory in Detroit, and he actually went to Atlanta, where Ole Anderson was there as a booker. With he went to
Yeah,
Atlanta. He's the one my brother, who made me go to Georgia. Actually, later on in my career, but I started in. I was the one mostly on the road. My brother Raymond did a couple of territories, but he was mostly working Montreal.
okay,
But when I hit 17 years old, I called up Stu Hart in Calgary, which is Brett's father, Brett the
yeah,
Hitman's Hart, and they had Stampede Wrestling out west. It was the Rougeaus out east, and it was the Harts out west in Canada, and there were
got
the
it.
two big territories. And I remember calling Stu Hart. I was 17 years old, and I used my notoriety. And my father's notoriety, I should say, and my uncle's, the Rougeau name. And when I called him up, it'll always be an iconic moment in my life, because Stu Hart was what a character he was, I'll tell you.
Oh,
And you know, the way he spoke to it was funny. And I remember the first conversation I had when I talked to my dad. I said, "Dad, I'm going to go to Calgary," and I was like 17 years old. And my dad looked at me, says, "You can't go now." He says, "You weigh 180 pounds. You're a pack of bones. You can't go yet." So I went to see my mom, and I borrowed $500 from my mom without my father's consent. And I took a flight, and I went, and I got on the phone first to make sure I had a job there. And I remember talking to Stu. I said, "Yes, Mr. Hart." I said, he said, "Yeah." I said, well, this is Jimmy Rougeau in Montreal, because my name was Jacques Rougeau, like my dad, my father Jacques Senior. But when I was young around the house, my mother would call me Jimmy, because my father was Jacques and I was Jacques. So she called my father Jacques and me Jimmy in English. So I was going out since I was going out west in Canada, it was English. So I introduced myself as Jimmy Rougeau. And I said, "Mr. Hart," I said, "my name is Jimmy Rougeau, and I said, I'd like to come and work your territory." And he says, eh, eh, "Are you are you are you any kin with the Rougeaus there?" And I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Jacques, my father, and Johnny, my uncle." And he says, "Oh, pretty tough guy there, your father, eh? Pretty tough guy." I say, "Yes, sir," but that wasn't me. But anyway, I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Okay, let me try you out there." So that's how I started in the business. And Brett was driving the bus at the time when I went to Calgary in '77. He wasn't even wrestling yet. And
wow,
so that's how I started from Calgary. And then I went to Calgary. I went to Mexico in '78. I started wrestling with Salvador Luterov, learning all those crazy backflips and being the only guy that didn't have a mask, because everybody in Mexico wrestled with a mask. I was the gimmick because I didn't have a mask. Like
wow,
opposite to here in North America or Canada and United States, when you had a mask, you were the gimmick. But when you go to Mexico, if you didn't have a mask, you were the outcast.
right,
So I went there as Roro Royo. Roro Royo was a babyface Jimmy there, babyface Rougeau. So I went there, and then I went to Kansas City for Bob Geigel and Pat O'Connor and Bob Brown. Then I went to the Fullers in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then I went to the Grahams in Florida, and then I went, well, like you said, it was territorial, and I was going,
right.
I went from territory to territory, and I was doing that from '77 all the way to '85, and then '85 I finally went to WWF.
Got it. Okay, so 85 was when you went. All right. So when you went, did you guys go together as a tag team,
Yeah,
or how did that work? So okay,
yeah. Raymond and I, we went. So another iconic moment there when we had the big limousine pick us up in Stamford, Connecticut,
oh,
and going to see Vince McMahon, where we're sitting in front of him, and I remember I was a little cocky then, I was a little, and I wanted to push, and I didn't want to be an easy an underneath card or something. I wanted to have a nice place, a nice position,
sure.
and I asked Vince. I said, I took all my nerves, and I asked him. I said, "Well, what are your plans for the Rougeau brothers, you know? And then I'll never forget it because 1,000 guys have passed in the same seat as me. But he looked at me and he says, the sky is the limit. And, you know, and that was his son, that was his line, boy, that he'd give everybody. The sky is the limit. You know, and I remember when he told me that, my eyes sparkled like, holy shit, we're going to be big stars, you know? And finally we were just a number. But anyway, all this to say that, what an experience it was to have the treatment of, being received with the limousine and the whole thing and meeting him. And I had many, many, many good years with Vince before my falling out. Yeah.
So what was it like working for him, like in the younger years? Because I mean, he was like, a lot of people didn't realize back then, of course I didn't, none of us did, that he was the owner. He just looked like a generic announcer, you know. And so what was it like working for him, and did it change as, you know, things as you know, he got older and you were there longer?
Absolutely. It was, well, you know, to be honest with you, it was one of those things. There was two people that made you nervous in the dressing room. There was Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon. And then and anytime they stepped in the dressing room, it was like, holy shit, Vince is there. Holy shit, Hulk's there. You know, and it was like, so you'd get really nervous being around them. And but it was fun working with Vince. At the beginning, it was really fun. It was like, he was close to his talent, and, but
Yeah.
you know, sometimes I look back, you know, when, I mean, even me, I had a falling out with him. Now it's been 30 years, but I look at all the good things that we've done together and stuff. And I've been being a promoter also. I had my business now for 25 years before COVID. I had my own company and dealing with talent and stuff, and seeing the other side of the medal, seeing the side that Vince, he gave a lot to a lot of people who, excuse my language, but double crossed him or let him down. So he got, his skin got a little thicker. So he didn't get as close with the talent with the years as they went on. It was more business. But I remember at the beginning, it was so much fun working with him because he'd get into the characters with you. Like, you know, I remember the fabulous Rougeau brothers, he had so much fun with our little American flags, you know, and laughing at the Americans.
Yes.
And but he had so much fun with that. Him and Pat Patterson, we were going over ideas, and even when I became the Mountie, you know, like you know, all the vignettes I used to do and stuff, you know, he'd see me, you know, and he'd have a smile on his face, you know, and he'd want to come to you. And so, but over the years, you know, things happened, and it became more a business so huge and so big that so the friendship kind of took a side, and it's just, it grew, we grew differently, like, you know, with the years, and the trust wasn't as good because we'd seen things. And when you're there, I was there for 11 years. So, you know,
right.
In 11 years, you see a lot of stuff. And
Yeah.
you see, and there's always, you remember that, you got to remember, a lot of people think there's always two sides to the story, but they're wrong. There's always three sides to the story. There's the guy who's saying it, the other guy who's saying it, and the guy on the outside who sees what's happening, you know?
Right.
So once you've been through that for 11 years, then you start understanding a little bit more, you mature more, you grow out of friendship and you grow into business. And, you know, and then you start thinking through the, and there's so many things, you know, Dylan, that people don't know. Like, you know, in our days, you know, we were on the road like 25 days in a row. And then we'd spend 3-4 days at home to see our kids and our wife, and back on the road for 25 days, you know, so there comes a time and that your life is going, you know, and the money's good, but nothing like today, but the money was still good at the time. But when you don't have a relationship, when you don't have happiness, you know, and you become lonely, and then when the times get harder, because you got to remember that all this is entertainment, but we still get into our characters and our gimmicks. We still want to get over. We still want to be main eventers. We still want to be the center of attention. So what happens is you go through phases where you get a push in our business, like you're highlighted, you're seen everywhere, you're part of the storyline, and then there comes a time you got to cool down. And you know,
right.
and when you got to cool down, it's a harder time, because now you still got to be 25 days on the road, making other people look good. And then you
Sure.
come home to your kids. You come home to your kids, and then you have your kid at the airport who hasn't seen you in 25 days, and he runs to you like crazy. And 2 days later, he brings you back to the airport, and he says, "Dad, why don't you love us? You know, like why
Oh,
are you always?" So and then if you have those guys that are like Martel, Jimmy Hart, myself, and Mike Shaw, Tito Santana. There's a couple of guys that were very very lucid, but you had other guys that were on steroids, on drugs, on uppers, on downers. So they had to deal with those situations. That was a lot harder when you had and I always remember the time that I go back and I think about Chris Benoit. You know, I heard a story. This is just hearsay, but I heard a story where his kid would have told him, like, you know, like, "Dad, why are you always losing?" But you know, when the guy's on steroids and he's not in touch with reality, and he has this kid that he hasn't seen for so long, and then that happens, then that's a major impact on a brain, you know, and
sure.
so all these stories that you see, learn, and it's nothing, you know. And I always come back to this when people tell me, like, when I was younger in the business, people tell me, like, God, Celine Dion, what a life she had, going to Dubai, going to Tokyo, she's traveling the world. What a lucky girl. She ain't lucky. She's losing her luggage she's going long airport flight delays, no food on the flight, someone that stinks beside you in the airplane for 8 hours. Or, you know, there's so many things that people don't know. You know,
Sure.
that they think it's the life, you know, life of a superstar. But let me tell you something. When you perform like a superstar all over around the world, it's hard. You don't see your family, you don't see your friends. So there's always a different perspective once you've lived it and you've seen it. So coming back to Vince, you know, if I wished anything one day, I wish, you know, before he passes away, you know, I'd like to sit down with him and make amends. You know, just
Yeah.
to tell him all the good times I had. You know, just to remember those good times and understand a little bit more, because now we're all more mature. You know.
Well, yeah.
And me too. You know, I've learned a lot too. I made my mistakes. You know, so we all made mistakes. So it's it would be a great time. It would be a great time for him to put me in the Hall of Fame. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, seriously. And I'm not just saying that because you're on here. I mean, you guys, your gimmick was awesome. It was entertaining. And one thing, and like I said earlier about the tag teams, because, you know, now that there's a lot of good tag teams, but they don't push it. Like, the tag team division was a huge part of WWF in the 80s, especially. And people that haven't seen it wouldn't know that or comprehend how featured and how good the matches were, because a lot of the matches are slower and a lot of chin locks and stuff, but the tag matches, you guys especially, you were flying up.
Even with the Rockers. Remember the
matches?
Yes. Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty? Oh, man, we had classic matches. But you know why people hated us so much? You know why? Because we don't like heavy metal. We don't like rock and roll. All we like to listen to is Barry Manilow. Hey, we're all
oh my gosh. You guys had some really classic matches so I was telling you a little bit when we were talking, I literally have a DVD set here, and it has every single WWF Coliseum video ever made. So all the best of the WWF, like every single one ever made. And I've got all of your matches on there. So many. It is. I would encourage people to go back and watch these and watch you guys at WrestleMania. And really dig back in.
Well, you know, Dylan, what happened that era, why a lot of people like to go back to that era is I think people tell me that when I go in Comic Cons around the world still, people tell me that. And it's because it wasn't a time where, are you still there, Dylan? I don't see you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. So it was a time where we'd have the expression where we'd say less is more. Like,
yes.
Today they're going 1,000 miles an hour, 1,000 moves. The guy who receives a drop kick today, he's standing up before the guy who gave it. You know, and so we take a lot more time doing our things, telling stories, and the characters were I think that people they love the characters. You know, think of Jake the Snake. You think of a Macho Man. You think of even Undertaker. You know, you think of King Kong Bundy. You think of the Coco Beware with his bird. You know, and you think of the characters. They meant something today in those days. So I think people miss that.
Well, it was a lot of larger than life characters that you can't ever forget. You just can't. And the characters, they were over the top at times, but it was so damn entertaining and different. And like you said, the realism with all of this high flying stuff that goes on, it doesn't, not that it looked more real when you guys did it, the way that it was structured and the stories that were told, and there was a lot more put into it, I guess, and you have to appreciate it. And everybody's different on what they like, and that's fine. But for me, I get a lot more out of you guys' era for whatever the reason. Maybe it's because I grew up on it. I don't know, but it resonates with me more, and I always go back to it. I watch a lot of old school Saturday Night Main Events still. I love that, and it was just awesome. So I wanted to ask you, how did the Mountie come about? What happened with your brother? Was he injured? Because I've heard the stories. Or what brought the Mountie character on? And was that something you came up with, or did Vince come up with that, or where did that come from?
No, now Dylan, before we get into this, I want to tell you I don't see you on the screen, so I hope you see me, because I don't.
Nope, I do, and
I don't see you on the screen. So before I start this story here, I want to make sure that I see that we're good.
We're all good. I've got you on here.
Okay, so I don't know why I'm not seeing you here on my laptop, but it's okay. So so probably because you're recording something. I don't know. Anyway, so here it is. Hopefully you see me. I
do.
So I took a year off because in 1989, we were 4 years, the fabulous Rougeau brothers, fabulous Rougeau brothers, from 85 to 89. And then 89, we were waiting for our title shot. As we always thought we deserved to have a run with the belts. And then out of nowhere, there's a tag team that came in that we were waiting for a spot, and Pat kept telling us, Pat Patterson, which was Vince's right-hand man, he kept telling us, don't give up, guys. It's coming. Your chance is coming. Your chance is coming. And then there's a team that came in, Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and the Brainbusters. And they just at the time when we thought we were going to get the belts, they came in and they passed right in front of us. And so it was like that's what Raymond he said. No, he says I had enough, and so Raymond took a retirement. He retired in 89. And so I took a year off. I came back home and spent a year with my kids and my family. And then Vince called me, and then he said, Jacques, he says, I have this character that I want you to portray there. And so he brought the character as the Mountie, and what an amazing character that was. And he had the big boss man in the United States, and then he wanted a Canadian law enforcement officer in Canada. And I told him, I said, I'd love to do it. I said, but I asked him to let me think about it, because I was coming back by myself. And and I just came finishing the feud with Dynamite Kid there, the big battle that we had backstage, and that was the hardest times of my life. So I knew I was going back in the jungle again, but this time I was going by myself. My brother Raymond wasn't there, and so I had to think about it. And then finally I told him, I said, hey, okay, I said I'll come back, but I said one condition. I said there are two conditions. I said the first condition is I want to have Jimmy Hart as my manager again, because Jimmy Hart's the greatest manager of all times. I'll come back to that in a second. And the other reason was I wanted to bring my shock stick, because I remembered Eddie Creechman, what he did to me when I was young in the dressing room, and I wanted to do it to everybody else, because I lived it. I knew how scary it was and how over it would get. But to come back to Jimmy Hart, I've seen a lot of managers in life, and I've been around them for like 11 years. And I could honestly tell you that Jimmy Hart is the best manager I've ever seen in the world. And now I'm going to explain myself why. Because a lot of people are saying, like, oh, of course he's going to say that. He was your manager with Raymond. He was your manager with the Mountie. But Jimmy Hart was much more than that. Jimmy Hart was the guy who I'm the Mountie. He wrote my song. He wrote my song of the Fabulous Rougeau brothers. He dress coded. Every suit that he had, he'd take his character, he'd take his talent that he had with him, and he'd make himself some suits that would match the costumes of the guys. He was always on time. He was never late. He was the only manager that I remember that would get on the screen and wouldn't say something like, well, let me tell you something. I'm the smartest one of them all, and I'm this and I'm that. Jimmy Hart would never take credibility. He'd always come
Right.
on. He'd always come on the air and say, "Hey, let me tell you something, baby. My man here, and he's the greatest, and my man here, he's the." He would never talk about himself. When he finished talking and introducing you, you feel like a king. You feel like you were the superstar, not him. And the truth was that he was the best. He was a superstar.
Right.
So, and he was always a guy that never, like myself, and like Raymond, and then I'm going back to Tito Santana, a couple of guys, we'd never go out in bars. We'd finish our show, we'd go to the hotel, go to bed, get up the next morning, find a gym, go to the gym and get a flight, 6, 7, 8 hours of flying, get to the next town and find a tanning salon to make sure you look good and tan. But Jimmy Hart was a professional, and there was never a guy like him. So that was one of my reasons why I came back. I told Vince I have to have Jimmy Hart as my manager because I knew right then I had him on my side. It was like a win-win situation.
Nice. A funny story for you. So I was, believe I was 7 years old, and I was one of the treats for me was I would get to go to the baseball card store if I got good grades or if I got a tooth pulled or something like that. And I went in there, and this is Des Moines, Iowa, and we're in there, and my mom pulls on my shirt, and she goes, "That's Jimmy Hart."
Oh, yeah.
And it was my mom that said it because she only really watched wrestling because I did. And so she went up to him for me, and he was so damn nice. Oh, my gosh. I still remember it. He signed like a paper bag. That was all they had in there for me. And he wrote a little thing on there for me. And I have heard so many wrestlers talk about how positive this man is, even now, as older as he is, and how he just seems like he's a young guy, in his 30s, the way he acts. And I've never heard a bad thing about Jimmy Hart, like literally never.
Jimmy Hart is the best manager of all times. He is a GOAT. He is, for me, I was the luckiest man to have in my corner, and I still meet him. I go to Comic-Cons around the world still. And every time I meet Jimmy, it's like even like a year ago, we met for the first time, me, Raymond, and him, and we started singing our song. We're all American boys, and we had so much fun looking at us sing that song because we'd remember all the lyrics and having fun. And me and Jimmy and Raymond just connecting eye to eye and going back 30 years, 35 years, and that split second. And then Jimmy Hart is definitely the best.
Let me go back on this timeline then, because I want to ask you. So I know when you guys were originally, you were faces, and for people watching, face means good guy. And when you turned heel, that's when you got Jimmy Hart, and he didn't he turn on the Hart Foundation and go with you guys, or walk me back through what happened?
Yeah, it's so funny because we worked with the Hart Foundation for like 4 years. We worked for the Hart Foundation. We worked 2 years where we were baby faces and they were heels, and they had Jimmy Hart as their manager. And then Jimmy Hart turned us heels, and the Hart Foundation turned babyface, and we worked another 2 years with them. And we moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and which we never did, by the way. It was only in the script. But we went to record at Sam Phillips, a recording studio where Elvis did his songs. We went in there and recorded our song, and but that was amazing. And I remember I remember doing those vignettes too, having so much fun, like saying, "Hi, I'm Jacques, and I'm Raymond. We're the Fabulous Rougeau brothers." And then we'd like to wish you a happy Memorial Day when it was Thanksgiving. Or we're so proud to be American, and happy Independence Day, but it wasn't the right birthday. But It was so funny, and we love the United States of America. And you know what the funniest part was? In that song, there was a French part in that song.
Yeah.
And it was so good because in the song, in the French part, we're saying, we like to piss you off. We like to make you mad. We like to laugh at you guys. And that's the lyrics in French. And we hate you guys. And then we'd come back in English and how we love you.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. So what I used to really, really, really like watching the Heart Foundation. What was okay, so let me ask you this. Who was your favorite team to work with, and who maybe did you guys either not get a chance to work with that you wanted to, or that you love working with?
Well, I can't, I got to tell you that there was two favorite teams, to be honest with you, for different reasons. For as far as quality wrestling goes, the Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, we had so much blast. We had marathon matches with them, 1 hour matches,
I remember.
And it was so easy to work with them. We were just so compatible. And have so much fun night after night, getting 20,000 people standing on their feet, from the minute we walked in the ring. We'd go sometimes 15 minutes at the beginning of the match, and we never locked up yet. We never had a lockup. And it's funny because I'd get in the ring with Shawn Michaels, example, and I'd go we'd go to turn around, like ding, ding, the bell would ring, and we start turning in the ring. And then I'd tell, just before we'd lock up, I'd say, wait a minute. And then I'd go and I'd back up. Then I'd back him up like this. And then I'd go ahead and I'd lay on my back on the floor, and then I'd do a nip up. Like, I'd land on my feet from being laying down on the floor. And then I'd look at the people like, how's that? How's that? And then I'd look at him and I'd say, hey, you say you're an athlete. Why don't you try it? And then I'd point and then he'd look at the people like, come on, let's wrestle. And then I'd say, wait, come on, you chicken? Come on, show me that you can do it. So then he'd go down, and finally, after about 2-3 minutes of working the crowd and everything, he'd get on his back, and then he'd do a nip up and land on his feet, and the people, 20,000 people, would be on their feet like, yeah. And then we didn't do nothing yet. So then we turn around, we start to go to lock up again. And then I'd say, wait a minute. So then I'd go on the outside of the ring, and then on the outside of the ropes, and I'd grab the ropes, and then I'd do a flip over the top rope and land on my feet in the middle.
I remember. I can picture it.
And then I'd look at him and I'd go, huh? You think you can? Try that one. So then he'd look at the people like, Jesus Christ, like, let's wrestle. Come on, referee, time to wrestle. And then I'd say, no, come on, chicken. So then finally, after 2-3 minutes, he'd go ahead on the outside and he'd flip over the top. He'd land on his feet, and we'd have another riot. People go crazy. So then we'd go, okay, so now I'm ready to wrestle. So we turn around a little bit. I go to lock up. He'd go underneath my arms. And then he'd go, wait a minute. And then he'd climb up the top rope, and he'd do a backflip from the top rope right into the middle. And then he'd look at me and he'd say, well, why don't you try that? And then I'd just looking at my brother Raymond like, holy shit. And then the people would go mad. They'd say, like, come on, you chicken shit, you do it. And so we'd go like 15 minutes in a match, and we never locked up yet. But
I love it.
So that's why we were telling stories then. Like, that's why we say less was more. Like, we had more connection with the crowd, more interaction with the crowd, which they don't have today, I think. But anyway, so the Rockers, definitely my favorite team, I got to tell you. And then the Hart Foundation, Jim the Anvil Hart was a little harder to work with. He was a little snug. Like, he was a big boy. He was a football player, big boy. And sometimes he wasn't the smoothest guy in the ring, but he was okay. But Brett was a great worker. Great worker. So the Hart Foundation. And then, of course, after working night after night after night, then we finally got to telling Jim, well, Jim, don't turn your shoulder in when you do that tackle there, because you're gonna tear up my ligaments there, just to open up a bit more. And so we adjusted, and once we adjusted, the Hart Foundation was a piece of cake to work with, night after night.
Yeah, you guys and people that haven't watched, you guys and the Rockers are like just a really good, like, combination to work with. There's a lot of synergy there in the way that you guys worked. It was a perfect match. I remember clear as day them coming in and you guys wrestling them. It was perfect. Was there a team that you didn't get to work with enough, or that you wanted to work with, that you're kind of disappointed you didn't get a chance to work with more?
To be honest with you, the British Bulldogs, we worked with them in Madison Square Garden one time, and we had a great match with them. And really enjoyed it. It was different style. I would have liked to work more with them, but they were baby faces, and so were we. So
right.
So that didn't work in that era, where it didn't work, and that was before we had our personal feud. So I would say, but to be honest, there's Demolition that I didn't like to work very much with, because they had a character that they were greedy. Like, they'd come in and they'd want to take over the match, They wouldn't react to selling very much. So you'd work very hard to, what example I could give you is, I remember working as the Mountie against the Undertaker. And if you go see on Daily Motion, the match between the Mountie and the Undertaker on Daily Motion, go check that out. You'll die.
Yeah.
I give 3 pile drivers to the Undertaker, but when even though he was a guy who didn't sell much, like he didn't react much, he did with me in the match. You'll see, I'd put the boots to him and he'd react to me. But Demolition was they had a character that they were unbreakable, untouchable. Like, they were trying,
right.
They were trying too much to be like, they're killers and they're indestructible. And so it makes it hard. It makes it hard to work with a team like that, because, we do certain moves, certain things that mean something, that are well executed. But if they don't react to them, you got to work 3 times harder to get something done, where so you'll blow up a lot more in a match. You'll get a lot more tired, because you have to do 3 times the work you normally do to get the reaction out of the fans that we did. But it wasn't their fault. It was the way that Vince wanted them to portray themselves.
Sure.
So I'm glad we didn't work very much with them, to be honest with you.
I'm assuming that it has to be difficult to work with a character that's more along the lines of no selling. Just even mentally, it has to be a little bit tougher.
Even Piper, like when I work with Piper,
yeah,
the Mountie, it wasn't easy working with Piper, because Piper was a guy who he was a go getter, like and what great cardio he had, but to get him down, you'd have to kick him 10 times to get him down, to stay. Well, some guys, if you're working with Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels, or one good kick, at one good place, and he'll go down and he'll make you look like $1 million, and then you have time to breathe. You have time to turn to the people. You have time to react, to get your heat, and get your charisma out there, and then turn back. And so it's a slower pace where we're telling a story. But guys like Demolition, Piper, and those guys, they were harder to work with.
Yeah, Shawn Michaels was sold like gold, man. Like really sold.
Yeah. Even Brett too. Brett and Shawn, they were.
Yeah.
It was fun working with them. I'd get them down, and I'd have them hurt so bad, in the match, that I could take 15 seconds talking to somebody at ringside or anywhere at the fans. I have time to go, and sometimes I'd have them down. I'd do a move to them, a flying elbow, like a running flying elbow off the ropes or something, and he'd sell it so good, or a drop kick. I was very famous for my drop kicks, and I'd give a nice drop kick right in the face, boom, and they'd sell it like I knocked their head off. I had time to go get the microphone off Mean Gene or off Howard Finkel, and then just get the microphone and say, "Do you know who I am?" And they were still lying in the middle and selling my move, So it made it fun. It made it fun those days.
Was there a team that you felt was maybe underrated, didn't maybe get the respect or the notoriety that they deserved when you were wrestling at all?
I think the Killer Bees. The Killer Bees. Yeah. The Killer Bees are great workers, great workers,
yes.
And I think they could have had a better run, And I'm also thinking of Tito Santana and Rick Martel.
That one comes to mind. Yes,
they could have had a great. Those guys, they both look so good. I mean, if I was a girl, I would have liked to go out with guys like that. So I envied their physique. They look good, and they worked out, and they took care of their bodies, and I think they were very marketable. and
Yeah.
they could have had a better chance, for sure.
I think a lot of on my end, what I see is that like the Killer Bees, as good of workers as they were, they didn't really have a character that you resonate with or that really came across. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have.
They were individual wrestlers put together.
Yeah,
Like
and they were great.
if you had like me and Raymond, I knew exactly where Raymond was at every minute of the match. I knew, and we worked a lot together. Everything we did together. The same thing as a Quebecer with Carl Ouellet. Every move that we did was together. We needed each other to make a great move. And I remember the tower at the end when he'd climb up the top rope and I'd grab his arms, and then we do that finishing tower there.
Yeah.
And with Raymond, when I'd climb up the top rope with Raymond, and then Raymond would pick the guy up in the middle, and I'd do like a big ass bump in the middle of the rope, and my ass in his face, and Raymond was holding him. We needed each other, but Brian Blair and Jim Brunzell, they did their own things separately.
Yep.
Exactly. So Jim Brunzell came in, do all those drop kicks, and Brian Blair would do his things, and they were the Killer Bees. But they didn't have the complicity of working together.
And I think with Tito and Rick Martel, they were so much better as singles wrestlers. I got to tell you, when I look back at what Rick Martel did with that model character, it is so freaking funny and so classic. And Tito, man, like before he was like the Matador and that garbage, when he was Tito Santana wrestling.
Arriba.
Oh man, when he wrestled Macho Man like in the 80s, those are damn classics.
And I think, and I also think, if I look back then, I'm going back, I don't want to repeat myself, but Rick Martel is another guy that I think, like my brother Raymond and I, we should be in the Hall of Fame, but Rick Martel should be there. Yes. There's no way on earth that Rick Martel should not be in there, like, and everything he's accomplished in the world of wrestling, and his professionalism but some things I'll never understand. I'm 63 years old, and there's a lot of things I don't understand.
I think that'll be till the end of time, brother. Like, because I don't, and that's just how it is. But man, Rick Martel was a technician. Like, seriously.
He was awesome. And, I got to tell you, coming back to the Hall of Fame, I got to tell you something really awesome happened to me this summer. There's a Project X Wrestling in Ontario, a company that opened up a Hall of Fame in Canada, and I was the first inductee that they put in.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's the first time the Rougeau name is in the Hall of Fame, but it's almost unthinkable that the Rougeau name is not in the Hall of Fame. 4 generations. It's almost like it's like the Funks, it's like the Von Erichs, it's like the Fullers, the Welches. How can you not have Ron Fuller, Robert Fuller, and their father, Buddy Fuller? People have tendency of forgetting where they come from. And the business today and the business in the 80s and the 90s, they came from the 60s and the 70s, and you can't forget that. You could have the nicest house on a mountain, the nicest house on the mountain, but if you don't have a great foundation underneath, it's going to crumble.
Right.
And I think that the wrestling business has a tendency of forgetting their foundation, and it's almost unforgivable. If you look at all the families of wrestling that should be in the Hall of Fame, and not one more better than the other, because I always said to myself, you could look at the great matches that Bret Hart had, that the Piper had, that the Rockers had, that Iron Sheik and Volkov had, and whoever, all the guys that we work with, Raymond and I, or me and Carl, or myself as a Mountie, I always say that when you go watch a movie, you go to the theaters, to create a great Batman, you need a great Joker. And so it takes 2 to tango, and you can't have a great hero if you don't have a better heel.
Exactly.
You need to have watch any movie you like. You could have the best baby face, best hero in the movie, but if you don't have a great villain, you won't create a great baby face or a great hero. So it takes 2 to tango. So I think of all the people that I've worked with, and Raymond and Tito and then Rick Martel, and all the people that we made look good along the way, well, they didn't do that on their own. They did it with us.
And, I hate to say this because it's the Hall of Fame, but what they've done with that, putting in like Pete Rose and Snoop Dogg, and then they put in people that are in groups and then single, and they're leaving people out like you guys and Rick Martel, like you said. It just demolition.
Anyway, but it's easy to criticize when you're on the outside. So I could criticize all my life, but all this to say that I want to thank DC Natman and Project X Wrestling in Canada, who inducted me as the first Hall of Famer of 2023 in the Canadian Hall of Fame. What a feeling it was, because when I went to collect my trophy and my plaque that they did to me, I made sure and told everybody there, all the media, that, hey, I'm here, but it's not me. It's Johnny.
Right.
It's Johnny Rougeau, Jacques Rougeau Sr., it's Eddie Auger, it's Raymond Rougeau, it's Arma Rougeau, it's my three sons, it's the whole Rougeau family that are taking this back home. It's not just me. It's what I'm just a part of it, and that's
right. It. So I got a couple more questions I want to ask you here. You mentioned the feud with Dynamite Kid. Now, I've read about it, but I don't know what's true and what's not. And if you don't want to get into it, that's perfectly fine if it's a bad memory. But I've read some things about it. If you want to talk about it, I think it'd be cool. If not, I totally understand.
It's a horrible memory, but it's and everything you've seen about it is true if you listen it from my mouth, because there's so many people that told the story, which is so much a lie, and because they were trying to protect him, but the truth is if you go on the what's it called, that show in the United States, there they have a show, Dark Side of the Ring, and go see the third season, and you'll see the real Dynamite Kid as he was, and the worst part is I liked him, I worshipped him when I came in WWF, him and Davey Boy, they were our heroes, me and Raymond. But the steroids, the drugs, and the uppers, the downers, the alcohol, and everything, and there's so much things that happened, and to be honest with you, I got beat up in Miami. The long story short, I'll tell you the short version, is I got beat up in the dressing room because I was gonna go and tell Vince about them ribbing me, going in my bag, and they used to like to play jokes, bad jokes to people, and very bad jokes, like hurting jokes, like example, I don't know if you remember a guy called Outback Jack. He was a guy from Australia.
Yep.
They took him to a bar. They put pills in his drinks, and they shaved his head off, and they put shit they put some shit. They shit in his crocodile coat, and then put him on a plane the next morning with everybody there. And he was so messed up he couldn't talk. He was dribbling from the mouth because they pilled him out, and he lost his job. And I remember a story. Someone told me that Honky Tonk Man was on his knees crying because they had him crying, because they used to be bullies, big bullies, and the worst part is and I remember and I hate to say this because Pat's dead today and he's a friend of mine, but I've seen so many times Vince and Pat have a good laugh, about the stories that they were doing, then they kept on going and going, and they should have put a stop to that. But it was I guess killing time, or I guess they become almost they're heroes of a lot of guys, as long as you were laughing at the jokes. Well, they weren't touching you, you weren't a victim, but I wasn't laughing at the jokes, and I didn't thought it was funny, so I was the next victim. And so when he started doing things to me, I told Mr. Perfect, I said, Monday I'm going back and I'm going to see Vince, and I'm going to tell on them, I'm not going to take this shit. 25 days on the road, I don't need to have my pants cut off when I get back out of the ring. It's I'm in the winter time, so by the time I got back after 3 days at home, Mr. Perfect went to stooge on me. He went to tell the Bulldogs that I was going to stooge on him, and so he came in the dressing room, and he beat me up bad, and he beat me up really bad. My face, it was almost like the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the back was in my face, and he punched me, kicked me, and on the floor, and so I almost quit the business, like Outback Jack and like others that quit, that just left. But I was too proud. I was a Rougeau, and I knew I wasn't wrong, and I knew I couldn't do this. I couldn't let them win the battle. And the funniest part is I'm not a fighter in life. I'm an entertainer. My brother Raymond's a tough guy. My dad's a tough guy. But I'm not. I'm a worker. So to be put in that position but I have a lot of pride and a lot of ego. So I decided then 3-4 days after being silent and not talking to nobody and just getting ribbed again after they beat me up. I stayed on the road the next nights to Chicago and the towns around, and they kept coming in the dressing room and banging their bags beside me and laughing at me and insulting me. And then finally, I told my brother, that I hadn't spoken in 3 days. I said, Raymond, I said, next Monday I'm doing a comeback. But I said, I'm going to do it in front of Vince and in front of everybody in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when we were doing TV tapings. So I called my father on the Sunday night, and my father was there when I got beat up in Miami. They actually beat me up in front of my dad. That brought me to the wrestling. And then so my father laughed. He saw me get in the car and he tried to talk to me on the way back to the house of Hollandale, and I was staying at my dad's house, and I didn't say a word. I didn't speak for 3 days. And so the last time my dad had seen me, I was like messed up bad and hurt. My father must have been hurting terribly. Now that I have 3 sons, I could imagine how he must have felt. And all this to say that, so I called him up after a week of not saying nothing, and I told Raymond I was doing the comeback. So I called my father up a week later on the Sunday night before the tapings on Monday, and then my father, I guess he must have got some news from Raymond, but I never knew about it. So anyway, I called him up on Sunday, and I told my dad, I said, Pa? And then he says, hello. I said, Pa? And then he says, Jacques? I said, yes, me. I said, I just want to tell you, I'm doing a comeback tomorrow. And because I wanted my father to be proud, and I just wanted my father to see that I'm not going to just put my head between my legs and go home, and the Rougeau name is dead, we just got kicked out of WWF because I left and I quit. Because Raymond wouldn't have stayed alone, that's for sure. So because we were tag team. So my father, the only thing he said to me, my dad, was so funny. My dad told me, he says, you listen to me. He says, before you go to the building tomorrow, he says, you stop at the bank. And I looked at, I had this funny face when he said that, and I was thinking he wanted me to talk about investments or things like that. So I told my daddy, I said, in my own mind, I was saying, like, what the hell are you talking to me about? And then he says to me, yeah, I never interrupted him. He says, you stop at the bank. And then he says, you go to the counter, and he says, you get yourself a roll of quarters. And he says, when you hit him, he says, you hit to kill him. You hear me? He says, you hit to kill him. And that's what my father said. And I'm not a fighter. So it's like, holy shit, I gotta do this. I can't believe I gotta do this. The guy's a monster, he's a tough guy. He's a fighter. And I was afraid. I was so afraid. And then the next day I went to the show and I did it. And I don't even know how I got the strength to do it. But I did it, and I knocked all his teeth out, with one shot. And that was the end of it. It was like, for 2 weeks I was I was very afraid because we had to finish the next 2 weeks with them. They went 2 days to Europe, and then when they came back, I was with them every night in every town, like Tucson, Arizona, for 10 days, and all the way Phoenix, and we finished that Survivor Series where we had to wrestle them the last night because they had gave their notice, and I knew that he wanted to hurt me bad the last night, and but I went in the ring anyway, and I don't know, I was scared, but at the same time, at that point, I didn't give a shit anymore. I didn't give the honor of my family was more important than me being scared, and I didn't want to become a McFly like in Back into the Future, where right. So all that helped me make it through. And after that, then he left, and a year and a half later, I was the Mountie in the dressing room. I'll never forget that in Philadelphia. And I looked on the card, on the sheet there in the dressing room, and then I saw Davey Boy Smith, on the card. He was coming back as the Bulldog. Davey Boy Smith was reappearing on the scene, and I remember Davey Boy Smith coming through that door the first night. after that. We hadn't seen each other for a year and a half. And as soon as he walked in, he looked at me. I was sitting down, and he said, he looked at me and said, Jacques, can I speak to you in the shower? And I said, oh boy, here we go again. Like, shit. And but I didn't sell. I didn't show him that I was afraid. So I just said,
Right.
yeah. So I said, sure, no problem. So I followed him, but far away, like 3-4 feet behind him. I didn't want him to sucker punch me, So we got into the dressing room. He turned his back, and he was quite far from me. And then he just extended his arm to me, and he says, I don't want no trouble. He says, what you did to Dynamite, he deserved it. He says, I just want this to be bygones. And I looked at him, and I watched his left hand to make sure that there wasn't a sucker punch coming. And I shook his hand, and we worked together after that for the title, and we had fun. And so it was finished. It was all over with.
That's awesome, man. The bullies always end up getting theirs, and that's just how it has to be, man. So,
but you know what the best thing of all that was for me? The best of all is when I quit WWF. For 20 years, I still up to last month. I go and I give conferences in schools, like for 600-800 people, kids, and I show them how to beat bullying without using violence. And I've been doing that for 25 years now, and I'm helping kids, and I do so many schools. You have no idea how much I've helped kids, and I'm persuaded as a hero now in Quebec, like, a really nice guy and a hero helping kids. And that would have never happened if I didn't get beat up by that kid. So it's almost like a blessing, I don't know if I can say that, but it's so nice that I've had a chance to help society with my bad experience.
That's amazing. So I got 2 more questions for you. The first one, with the Mountie character, and then going into the Quebecers, what was that something that you really, really enjoyed? And what was your favorite moments? Like, because I know you won the Intercontinental title. Was that your greatest moment or greatest achievement? And then how about like the tag team experience, and what was that like compared to working with your brother, and how different was it for you? And that was a later stage in your career. And
well, there's a lot of questions and answers that I got for you at the same time there. So let me try and clear this up. As a Mountie, it was so good, but the thing that was bad about the Mountie is that they had to cool me down really fast suddenly after the Big Boss Man SummerSlam jailhouse match.
Yeah.
We had to spend the night in jail, which was awesome. The pay-per-view around the world, it was so awesome. I hear about it today. People come to Comic-Cons and they still talk about the jailhouse match. But they had to cool me down because the real Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada, they banned me from wrestling on TV. I was giving such a bad image to them. So they took a lawsuit against the WWF, and so I wasn't allowed to wrestle on TV anymore. So when they do the TV tapings in the States, I couldn't be on TV anymore because they use the same tapes to go to Japan, to Europe, to Australia, to Canada, and so that killed me. My Mountie, they killed my Mountie, and I was so funny for so many years. After that, I was so pissed off because I was having such a great run with it, the Mountie, and I always said to myself, when I'd meet a real Mountie in life, or I'd tell your boss to get off his high horse, like this is only a gimmick, this is only a character, like you have movies. Like you have movies where you have bad policemen, crooked policemen. Well, that's all I am. It's a movie, it's a character, but they banned me from TV. They just killed my life, my income, my job. They just,
yeah.
So then after that, so that's why Vince, he put me back in a position where We're Not the Mounties was our song, which Jimmy Hart created again. We're not the Mounties, we're handsome.
Mm-hmm.
And we did really well, Carl and I. We won the tag team titles 3 times, in a team. And but that was fun. It was a different style of working with Raymond, where Raymond and I, we were more like girly-ish tag team, like, cheating tag team,
Right.
and hypocrite, doing everything behind the referee's back. Where when I came back with Carl, it was more like two tough guys, like, come in and just using awesome moves together to destroy our opponents. So it was a different kind of style of wrestling. So I had a great time there too, as the Quebecers. But if you ask me personally, my favorite time in life is being with Jimmy Hart and my brother Raymond as the fabulous Rougeau brothers, and of course being the Mountie, and finishing up with the jailhouse match, with taking my prints in the jail, and the picture, and putting me with that gay guy at the end there, and in the cell. That was so funny. That was just so funny. But so those are my favorite moments, and I don't know if you know this, Dylan, but I still managed, when I quit the WWF and when we finished my relationship with Vince and them, I still managed to create another great moment in life. You may not know this, but I know it's not being the Masked Singer, because I did that, but it's beating Hulk Hogan in Montreal.
That was my next question, and I wanted to get that, because a lot of people don't know about that. I do. I'm more of a wrestling historian, so I've read about that, but I want your version of it. I want to know what really happened, and because if most people haven't seen the list of how many people Hogan's actually lost to clean, I think it's like 14.
Yeah,
it's not much, and I know he doesn't allow that. So why Jacques Rougeau? Why did you get to be one of the few that he put over?
Well, I love Hulk to death today. I even last year was at his karaoke bar in Tampa. If you're ever in Tampa Bay, Clearwater, go to his karaoke bar. You'll have a great time.
We go every year. We go every year.
Yeah, we have so much fun there. But I think Hulk had a lot of respect for me, because I never was I always was when I confronted Vince, when I turned people down for money, or I stuck to my grounds, or my how can I say that, my values, my how can I say that there in English, my when you stand up for your
stick to your guns, man.
Yeah, stick to your guns, but I'm looking for a word there, like, your what you believe in.
Yeah.
And I've left jobs before because of that, because people didn't do what they said they were going to do, or things like that, where other people would have said, oh, well, just shut up and take the money. I always was the type of guy that rather be a king in my world than a jack in somebody else's, where I'm mistreated, and I'd rather have my little world where I'm the king, and even if and Hulk knew that. I've did a lot of moves in this business that hurt me business wise, but my pride and my instinct and my I'm looking for a word that I can't find, but anyway, so long story short is I'm a stand-up kind of guy. And I've always been, and Hulk respected that. As a matter of fact, even when the thing happened with the Bulldog, he never came out and said nothing about it. But I heard through the grapevines that he was so happy, because he was also afraid to be bullied by them too. Don't forget that now. Like he was not a victim because he was the big main man, but everybody else around him were victims, or afraid to be. So I'm sure he was afraid too. So when I stood up my ground there, it wasn't easy. And I think he had a lot of respect for me for that. The other thing too that happened is when I left WWF, I went to WCW for a short time, and I had a lawyer in Montreal, Cookie Lazarus, that was so powerful here in Montreal, and he opened the doors for WCW. There was a thing on the Molson Center, which was named it was the Bell Center and the old Montreal Forum. It's the same building that changed names, and almost like the Madison Square Garden in New York, it's the Bell Center in Montreal, and
Okay.
and WWE had a exclusivity of events of wrestling in that building. And when I left Vince and I went to WCW, I wanted to book a show in Montreal, or WCW wanted to book a show in Montreal, but they couldn't because Vince had the exclusivity. But however, what they didn't know, Vince didn't know, is we have something in French here in Quebec that's called the droit de la charte de la liberté du Québec, which means the charts of liberty of Quebec. You can't have an American keep a Canadian or a Quebecer to rent a building, you know, in his own town, because he's American. You know, like the Quebecer will always have a right to rent a building as much before an American. So WCW went through me and my lawyer to book the Bell Center. To get the exclusivity out of there, I kicked them out, and I booked a show for them to come, and it was my show. The whole show that I booked in WCW, the only time WCW came to Montreal was my show. I booked Luger,
Wow.
I booked Malenko, I booked them all. Ric Flair, I booked them all. It was Mongo Michaels, and I booked the Giant. Paul White against Carl Ouellet. I booked the main event, me against Hulk, but I never expected to go over. You know, my dream was to work with him, and that's it. And then finally, when we came to Montreal, I asked Hulk 1 month before that to help me with a promo in Atlanta where he came, and I was doing a promo against him, and he walked in my promo, and he slapped the hell out of me in the promo, and then you could find that if you go on YouTube, and he slapped me really, really hard, and it looked really good, and then the day of the show when I flew into Montreal, I had all the cameras of all the TV stations, because I got a lot of connections and medias in Montreal, so I had all the major stations and TV stations at the airport when he arrived, and I had a limousine to pick him up, to bring him to the building, but I was hidden in the limousine. So when he turned around to cut a promo to everybody, I stepped out of the limousine and I slapped the shit out of him. I actually broke, I broke his tooth. I really did, in a shoot. Like,
Wow.
you know, but I was excited. I didn't do it on purpose. I was just so excited that when I slapped him, I broke his tooth. And anyway, so when we got in the dressing room, and you could ask, what was the guy's name? There was two black guys that were tag team then.
Harlem Heat?
Yes, Booker T, and another one, Ray.
Stevie Ray and Booker T.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they were there too, and they were all in the dressing room, and it was so funny because Hulk, he came in the dressing room, and we were all there, and he just looked at me in front of everybody, and you know, when Hulk walks in, then people just don't talk anymore, like, you know. So he came in the dressing room, and he came up to me, and he says, well, Jacques, he says, so what are we doing tonight? You know, so like I was the boss, and I wasn't boss of nothing. You know, he was the king. So he looked at me again. So what are we doing tonight? So everybody started laughing, and I started laughing too. You know, and then it was so funny. I said, very funny, Hulk, very, very funny. So I said, so how do you want to do this, Hulk? Like, you know, how do you want to beat me? And he says, brother, it's your show. So he says, you're going over tonight. So he says, how do you want to do this? And then I started laughing so hard because I knew he was ribbing me, you know, I knew he was joking, you know, and everybody was laughing too. And then he kept coming on like, no, I'm serious, brother. He says, it's your night tonight. He says, you're going over.
Wow.
And then everybody started quieting down. And it was like, and so did I. And then finally, when I realized he was serious, I said, okay. I said, well, then in that case, just make sure you beat me up really good. And then if you want, I'll just small package you at the end, like, you know, a desperate move, like, you know, or something. And like I catch you off guard. And he says, I love it. Let's do that. So we went out there and we did it. So if you go on YouTube, just anybody can go on YouTube, put Jacques Rougeau versus Hulk Hogan. The match is there. You can see it. And I'm one of the only Canadians to have a clean pin on him. Like, you know, 1, 2, 3, no gimmicks, no chairs, no tables, just a clean pin. And then you could hear a pin drop fall on the floor when I win, because the 18,000 people that were there, when it happened, they just like, they stopped. You know, he was NWO. He was at the prime of NWO when that happened, you know, and then Bischoff was pissed off like a son of a gun so I think there was heat between Hulk and Bischoff. So I think that Bischoff was trying to show Hulk that he was the boss, and Hulk was trying to show Bischoff he was the boss. So I think that Hulk used me to show Bischoff, like, hey, who's the boss? You know, and so I was at the right place at the right time, I guess.
Man, I mean, did that literally just shock the shit out of you when he came to you with that?
I couldn't believe it. And it shocked more the shit of the boys, because there were so many boys that didn't understand what was going on. And as a matter of fact, it shocked it so much that when I came back in the dressing room after my match, there was none of the boys left. All the boys had left the dressing room. There was nobody there.
Wow.
It's like, nobody wanted to see it, I guess.
I pulled a list up. I pulled this list up here. I want to read this list real quick. The 10 people that Hogan has lost to clean. Ultimate Warrior, which we all remember. Triple H on SmackDown. Brock Lesnar on SmackDown. I remember this Undertaker Survivor Series 91 because that one caught me way off guard. Antonio Inoki in Japan. Roddy Piper at Starrcade. Then you at the house show. Kurt Angle, Goldberg, and The Rock. Now think about that. Look at that list. Look at that list. You're on that list. That's amazing.
I can't believe it. But the way you're saying that, it's like so there must be a mistake somewhere.
Well, that's just, what an honor to be on that list. That's amazing, man. Look at the company.
So you know what? Just there, you're going to say I'm repeating myself, but I need to be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, shit. Come on. All I need is that list.
That's incredible when you say that. I don't deserve to be there with all those top guys. To be honest with you, I'm nothing compared to all those guys that had great pushes and stuff like that. But you know what? The thing is, in Quebec and in Canada, but mostly in Quebec, I'm an icon, and I've wrestled for 45 years in the business. So nobody's as popular as me in Quebec, as far as wrestling goes. If you come in Montreal and, you talk to anybody, whether it's in figure skating, whether it's in politics, whether it's in music, and then you ask any person on the street, say, can you name me a wrestler from Montreal? They're going to say Jacques Rougeau.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, that's cool.
Hulk Hogan is probably the one guy that was protected his character the most. So he ain't going to put nobody over that is not somebody he really, really, really respects and doesn't think it'll hurt.
I love him to death. I'll always be in debt. And every time I see him, it's funny. I even went into his shop there, like he's got some shops in Orlando.
Yeah.
And every time I'd go there I was passing through with the kids to go to Walt Disney or something. I'd go and bring the kids to see him. And every time, it was like, it was so funny. The last time I went into his shop in front of a bunch of my friends and my family, but it was so amazing, he just keeps putting it on and on. I come in his shop, and he says to me, he says, "Oh no, brother, you're not going to come beat me up again, are you?" And it's like, it's amazing that a guy is so iconic and so popular. And I still think to this day, he is the biggest name of wrestling that ever will be. I know people say it's The Rock and this, but remember your foundation. Remember the foundation of the house. And Hulk Hogan, Hulkamanias in the 80s. People don't know. I remember going to Australia the first tour I did in Australia around the other side of the globe. And when we got at the airport, and you should have seen, it was like Michael Jackson getting out of the plane. It was amazing, Hulkamania. Nothing ever compared to Hulkamania. Nothing.
It's hard. So it's really hard if you didn't grow up then or witness it and see it. It's one thing to go back and watch YouTube videos and hear people talk about it, but like I grew up on it. And I saw it, I lived it, and he was like, "You're fucking hero." And all, like, to me, it was like Michael Jordan and Hulk Hogan in the 80s, where you can't explain it unless you were like and I'd hate to say just a kid because even adults, but if you were a kid and you grew up in that and you saw it, you experienced it, and you lived it, and it meant that, like, I'm not lying to you, so this was WrestleMania 6 would have been 87, like 91 or 90. I fucking cried when he lost the Ultimate Warrior. I was like 8 years old, 7 years old. And I literally cried. That's how bad it bothered me.
And to be honest with you, Dylan, to explain it to people, to explain it to people how it was, how amazing, how magnetic, how powerful, charismatic he was. I'll explain it to you in 2 words. And, we're superstars. We're superstars, not as like him, but we're superstars. We're seen around the world. We're recognized around the world. And we're in the dressing room. And when he would come in the dressing room, I would be nervous of what I say. I would be intimidated. I would be just hoping that he'd go by me and say, "How you doing, Jacques?"
Right.
Like, that's how it was. Imagine I was one of the boys and I felt like that. So imagine the fans, how they felt.
Oh man, I'm telling you, it was on a whole different level. And I was lucky enough, and blessed enough that I saw him live several times. I don't know if you remember when he wrestled the Big Boss Man in the steel cage on Saturday night's main event. That was here in Des Moines, and I was there, like fifth row. It was amazing, man. It was amazing. And I still have the little Hulk Hogan shirt that you could tear, and I never tore it, and I saved it all these years that my mom got me when I was like 5 years old, and I still have it.
Anybody that tears their shirt up today goes back 40 years. You always think it's Hulk. You always think it's Hulk. Tear that shirt up. Any character, any gimmick that would come along for the next 50 years. If they tear their shirt up like that, the first image you have is Hulk Hogan.
I know it. It's amazing. It's so cool, and it stands the test of time, and a lot of people don't understand too, because a lot of the content's hard to find, just like a lot of your matches are. You have to really go back and dig and look back. A lot of it's on Coliseum Video. You got to do Daily Motion, like you said, not necessarily YouTube. There's a lot of wrestling on Daily Motion.
If you haven't seen the match on Daily Motion, the Mountie against the Undertaker, you're gonna see a classic.
Oh, I'm watching that for sure, because the Mountie matches are awesome. Awesome matches, the Mountie matches. I love those. I prefer the Rougeau matches myself because I love the tag team wrestling.
Yeah.
The Mountie matches were something else, man. They really were. I loved those. And like I told you before, that character freaked me out when I was a kid. And I was telling a couple of my friends that are wrestling fans that you were going to come on. And you know what the first text message I got back was? He always gets his man.
That'll stick. Yeah, that'll stick with a lot of people. That's what happens when I go in. That's what I hear too when I go in Comic Cons. It's funny. That's the thing. I always hear that song, "All American Boys" with the Fabulous Rougeau brothers, or the Mountie always gets his man, and that's stuck with the people. And you know what the funniest thing with that character, the Mountie, is? I gotta tell you a scoop. I gotta give you a scoop.
Please.
I just had this idea, and now I forget what I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. So I wanted to say something about, everybody comes to have me sign dolls and stuff like that, figurines. They all have the Intercontinental title around the figurine, But, I only had it for 2 days.
I remember.
I only had it for 2 days. I beat Bret Hart. 2 days later, the Rowdy Piper took away from me. But for all these years now, 35, 40 years later, all the dolls that are coming out, I have the Intercontinental title. It's so funny.
That's so awesome.
But that's not what I wanted to tell you. I just wanted to, since I'm in the bragging mood, I want to tell you something. I'm in something that really is funny. And I have this company now in New York and Montreal. They're working together, and they're actually working right now on putting like they have machines, like pinball machines and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's a machine, it's a machine that has like a claw like this and goes down there and it's big. So they're doing a Jacques Rougeau machine, that's going to be distributed all over Canada and possibly in the United States, like for fairs and stuff like that. There's a company doing that right now. Isn't that something?
That's so badass, man.
So you may go into a fair one day and you're going to see the Jacques Rougeau Mountie, or you'll see me on the machine there, and you'll be able to. So here's what they're doing. So this company, they're buying like 100 belts. They bought 100 belts, and if that machine goes and picks up the thing, I don't know how it's going to work yet. We're in the making of it now, but they give you a belt if you manage. So you get the IC belt.
That's so badass.
So it's $5 you get one try, and then for $10 you get 3 tries. But they're explaining to me we're in the process of putting this on the market, and I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing.
I was just going to say, I'll pump some coins into that if I see one. Then I was thinking in my head, like, hey, dipshit, nothing takes coins anymore. It's dollar bills, So if I see that, I will definitely, because I collect belts. I have the Winged Eagle Championship belt, which is to me the best belt ever made. But I need a Continental belt, so I've got to go do that if I see that claw, man. I love those games.
And another thing too, while we're at it, there's this company in Iowa that you'll see it go by on social medias. They just made 2 new dolls that are coming out in the next 2 months. In the next 6 months is the Quebecer dolls and the Fabulous Rougeau dolls. It's going to be for the first time that they're going to have the Fabulous Rougeau dolls out. So there's a lot of good things happening to me, and I don't know why it's happening so late in my career, but it's sure nice to see that happen.
Did you say the company was in Iowa?
Yeah.
No shit. That's where I'm at.
No, I'm sorry, in Ohio. Ohio.
Oh, I was
Ohio.
going to say,
sorry.
whoa.
No, it's Ohio.
No.
No, it's talking with you that I'm thinking Iowa, but it's
Yeah.
it's Ohio. It's a company.
Okay.
So you'll see it on the social medias. It's gonna if you go on my Facebook, you'll see it anyway because they send me the design already. I put it on my Facebook. So
why didn't you guys? Because I literally have every single LJN wrestler, which are the best wrestlers ever created, the rubber ones. Well, how come you guys didn't have an LJN wrestler?
Beats me.
It doesn't make any sense. I don't get that.
So that's why on my Facebook, when I put that thing about the dolls, I had 150 people say, "I want one of those. I want one of those. I want one of those." So,
dude, I gotta have those. Those are a must for me because that doesn't make sense. Now that I think about it, it doesn't make sense.
So anybody that wants to have to know what's going on with me in my life, just I'm not very, very good in social medias and Twitter and stuff like that. I don't really go but Facebook, I'm very active. So if you go on my Facebook, it's me and my girlfriend. You'll see the picture of me and my girlfriend. Then you could go see everything that's happening with me and everything that I'm doing. Hey, by the way, look at these guns. Huh? Not too bad, huh?
Yeah, that's right, man. Absolutely.
63 years old.
That's awesome, man. That is so awesome.
So go on my Facebook and follow what I'm doing. You'll see I'm still very implicated with the society and doing good things. So and with this wrestling academy, that I'm doing now, just go check it out. It's I'm still living my dream at 63 years old. And the last thing I'm going to tell you, Dylan, before I let you go, I want to tell you this. It's very important for those people that are listening.
Yes, please.
You got to, and I say that in my conferences and schools and everywhere, just remember one thing. You got to live your passion. You got to do in life what you want to do, because if you punch your hour cards at your job from 8 to 5 for 30, 40 years and you don't like what you're doing, I can't imagine how life is going to be long and horrible. But, so if you don't succeed the first time in what you want to do, your dream or your passion in life, go for it again and go for it again, even if it takes 2, 3, 4 years, because once you've attained your passion and you live your passion, instead of getting up in the morning and saying like, oh, I got to go work today, you're going to be getting up and saying, I can't wait to get to work. And that's the difference of a lifetime, believe me. So live your passion out there, people, kids, and everybody, just live your passion.
Absolutely. I mean, look at me. I woke up this morning. I said, dude, I get to interview Jacques Rougeau today. Like,
You're very kind.
I mean, geez, what could you want? So, well, I can't tell you how much it meant to me to actually get a chance to talk to you and for your time, because I know that you're very busy, and it was such a blast. This is how I like to spend my afternoon. Let me tell you right now.
Well, the good news is this was probably more fun for me than it was for you. So
I appreciate it so much. So, guys, follow Jacques. Check out his Facebook, because that's where, like he said, that's where he does a lot of his interacting and his posting. And really, I'll post the links that we discussed in the description here so people can follow you. But like I said, Jacques, absolute pleasure to have you on. I can't thank you enough. And, I'd love to have you on again at some point, and just I'll keep following.
I think I've said everything I had to say, so it wouldn't be good if I
Oh, man. Well, your time is greatly appreciated, and I can't thank you enough. So everybody make sure to follow Jacques, and that's it for today. So stay tuned for plenty more to come. Dylan Gemelli and Jacques Rougeau signing off.